Know what happened in 1917. That's over 100 years ago. You look at 1917, the pandemic, it was something.
The worst pandemic since 1917.
1917, that's something.
1917 was a time.
In 1917, it was vicious. Everybody that writes a book about the Spanish flu, 1917.
You know, the big one was 1917. You read about him. You read about it from 1917.
A virus, the likes of which this world has not seen since 1917.
Hi, this is John Cullen. Welcome to another episode of Hypothetically Speaking, Heroes of the Pandemic. I'm joined once again by Amy Question It from Twitter. Amy, thanks for joining me again here on the show. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having me back.
It's my pleasure. We've been talking about this other pandemic that we sort of got tipped off, I guess, listening to Donald Trump rant and rave about the 1917 pandemic. And then we saw these samples that came from the first patients in Wuhan that had another virus. And I had been tracking this P&I issue, the number one comorbidity of COVID in the United States for some time. And so it kind of took us down this path of another pandemic, this parallel outbreak. And you've been looking into the timeline of it. And it seems like this is something that's been going on much longer than the COVID story. And so I thought it would be helpful for everybody to see if we could kind of reset the timeline for a different pandemic. Not COVID, not SARS-CoV-2, but the thing that seems to have just killed a quarter of the egg-laying chickens in America. Right? So it seems that we just had the deadliest avian influenza outbreak in chicken history, certainly. So, you know, the chickens will attest to that. And that particular strain seems to be incredibly pathogenic, potentially. We had this Operation Crimson Contagion and all that. So there's like a whole lot going on with this other pandemic. And it seems that it started way before January 2020. And so that's kind of what I was hoping we could focus on in this show. What are your thoughts on that? You okay with that, or you want to talk about Chick-fil-A or something different?
No, that sounds good.
Okay. So let me turn it to you. I mean, what did you prepare as far as, you know, how do you want to structure the conversation? How do you want to do it?
So I think that it's important to go back to 2013. Some of the slides that I have, you know, we discussed a little bit last week, but I think to kind of see it from where it started to how we got to where we are. Now, I did just realize as you were talking though, John, that I did not put in the timeline, I don't believe, when the study was done that showed H7N9 popping up in these Wuhan patient samples. So I apologize for that. I can't remember if I put it in there or not. But we know that happened, and we'll get to that point.
We'll get to that. Okay. All right. Well, I've got your slides up so the audience can see what you've prepared. And why don't you walk us through? I'll flip through the pages, and you tell me when to go to the next page, and let's help people understand that, sort of the depth and breadth of this other outbreak, this other virus.
Okay. So, I wanted to start this with this first slide with these two books, because this is kind of, you mentioned Trump, taking Trump and some of the things that he said specifically about, 1917, these plans, one being the Crimson Contagion that is there, and then also the pandemic crisis plan, which were handed over to Trump from the prior administration. So Obama, which of course we know that Fauci was part of that, John Holdren was part of that, and many other players. But this is kind of where everything takes off. And so I thought this would be good to show that, and we can go to the next slide. And then of course I put in this slide for good old YouTube. And for anyone who is listening, just if dates are different, depending on your source, they may be off a day or two. But for the most part, they are pretty close. And at the end of all of my slides are all of my sources. And then I also wanted to, on the next slide, give special thanks to Ellen Bubba on Twitter. He sends quite a bit of information my way. So I just wanted to give a shout out to him.
That's Bubba's Lamb Chop. That's Bubba's Lamb Chop Shop.
Yes.
Yeah. So I agree and echo the sentiment. So LM Bubba at Bubba's Lamb Chop Shop has been incredibly helpful, as has Dayu. Dayu is the one who first shared this record of these early patients showing the H7N9 and said, yeah, this was kind of weird. We thought this was a contamination. So, certain people have played real key roles here in uncovering this mystery. And as far as the thing with YouTube only seems to care about COVID stuff. We're not really talking about SARS-CoV-2. We're talking about a whole different thing here. This has nothing really to do with COVID. So I don't think we're going to get in any trouble. This has nothing to do with COVID. This is a whole different thing. This is about chickens. So this is for those of you who are into Chick-fil-A and KFC and stuff like that. So this has nothing to do with COVID. This is a completely different story. So I think we're in the clear. All right. So why don't you tell us the chicken story? Because obviously, right, there was no influenza. Everybody's dealing with COVID. And so we had this big chicken thing. So thank you, Bubba's Lamb Chop Shop. Thank you to Dayu. Thank you to everybody who's helped pull this information together. And I think it's the one thing I agree with Hillary, right? It takes a village to pull this stuff off. So, all right, next slide. 2013, The Tale of Two Cities. What's this all about?
So this is kind of where everything started. In China, it was June 26th. I believe was their first H7N9 case. And I wanted to show this because, clearly you can see what it says, but what I wanted to point out about it is that it's looking at H5N1 and then the time between it, 16 years to the H7N9. But most importantly, the last part there, that they caused severe pneumonia that did not respond to typical or atypical antibiotic treatment and had high mortality. And I thought that was, very relevant when we're looking at, the death count and seeing this H7N9.
My understanding is that there's very few cases of H5N1 in human beings, is my understanding, but I could be wrong. I could be completely way off. But my understanding is there's very few recorded cases of H5N1 in humans. We're going to have to look into this and see how much of that there is. I hate when they put two things together and they say this and that caused this. It's like, they're different things. It's like, all right, but both of them are showing the same. So it's saying H5N1 and the H7N9, both were causing and both were not responding. So both
And
of
if I'm not mistaken,
right?
John, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Is the gain of function that Yoshi was doing back in the early 2000s, wasn't that with H5N1?
Yeah, yeah. He was doing H5N1 prior to the H7N9 contract. Yes, absolutely.
So
Yeah. Yeah. So there we go. Okay. All right. So let's keep going. So 2013 then continued, and now you're going to take us to the Pearl River Delta and the Yangtze River Delta. What's the story there? What's this all about?
So this is, I don't know, I would be lying if I didn't say that I don't know the full story behind it, other than there was a lower pathogenic H7N9, and then this higher pathogenic, and it that's the difference. I don't know the story fully behind the actual area. I apologize, I don't know that, but that's where this H7N9 emerged. And they're saying right here why H7N9 seems to be more readily transmitted from poultry to people than H5N1 is still unclear. So
Interesting.
but both of these particular viruses have the ability to adapt more to humans and to infect them than other virus strands of influenza.
I think I just realized I made a mistake again about something. Because we've been focusing on the 2014 contract from Kawaoka, where he gets the go ahead to do gain of function on H7N9, and they tell him that it's okay even though there's a freeze, he can do whatever he wants anyway. I'm afraid that might be an illusion again. What's the illusion? I fell for it. I made the assumption that's the first time Kawaoka did gain of function on H7N9. That's a
in 2014.
Right. Now I'm looking at this and I'm thinking that's a pretty poor assumption. Maybe the contract in 2014 was his second tour of duty, so to speak, on H7N9, or third go round for all we know. I mean, just because we have the paperwork doesn't mean it was the first time he did it necessarily. I'm seeing characteristics that you're documenting here. What you're sharing with us sounds gain of function-y to me. That's a very technical term, gain of function-y, right? So it sounds gain of function-y to me too soon. This is before the 2014 contract, and I'm already hearing pathogenic characteristics that sound like he's already had his fingers in the pie. And is he swinging for the fence in 2014? Is he going for the 200x that we've read about before with him? One of the things he documented as doing is making a particular virus 200 times more deadly so that you cannot survive it. Taking something like an influenza and making it like a rabies. Rabies has like a 99% case fatality ratio, right? It's ruthless if you don't get the preventative. So he's been doing stuff like that, and what you're describing here to me sounds already too pathogenic for a low pathogenic H7N9. But again, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I'm not an epidemiologist, but I'm hearing these characteristics and they sound already, I don't know. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong. So readily transmitted from the chicken. So no wonder Kenny Rogers went out of business, right? Kenny Rogers Roasters, right? They were acquired by some Malaysian company or something. So I think they bought them for $50. All right, let's take it to the next slide. 2013 continued. The bird flu strain H7N9 shows up in China in 2013. But the last time we were together, and I don't want to take you too far off track, you showed us that it was in Ohio, it was in Delaware, it was in Minnesota, it was in a bunch of places before 2013, but it seems like nobody seems to take note of any of that until it gets to China. And then it's the Chinese H7N9, the Chinese H7N9. Am I wrong about it? I mean, what's with all this?
No, you're absolutely right. And that may be very well, if your hypothesis about Yoshi and doing gain of function, if it was already in the United States back in, I believe, what was it, 1998? Don't quote me on that, going from memory.
In Minnesota. Yeah, Minnesota. That's the turkey.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes. Where did I say?
That's right. That's right. No, 1998, the turkey in Minnesota. That was the bird that showed as both wild and captive, right? It showed.
Right. And then it showed up in Nebraska. There were, because you were joking about Rehoboth, because there were 2 strains in Delaware.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody pays any attention to it until 2013 for some strange reason. And I still don't understand that preamble, so to speak. I don't get that. It's like, why was there no attention paid to this somewhat novel strain in Delaware, Ohio, Minnesota, etc.? And then, like, again, you were showing us 2011. It's only 2 years before China, and then it gets in China. Now, all of a sudden, this is something of international concern. It's kind of weird. And the fact that it's already demonstrating some of these highly pathogenic properties as early as 2013, 2014, before Kawaoka gets the funding. I'm wondering if this funding was for him to make the cherry to go on top of the sundae. I'm wondering, did he build the sundae in 2011 and we just haven't found the paperwork yet?
Or perhaps even sooner than that, when he was doing his gain of function with H5. And what, that's all around that time. And I haven't had the opportunity to dig into that yet.
All right, let's step through this one. Let's step through this. So we've got the 2013 bird strain shows up in China. And then we've got these various waves. So walk us through these waves, if you would.
So what's interesting about these is the timing. So, they have the first wave in March of 2013. Right. The second surge is again in October. Now, again, keep in mind, the first wave in 2013 of March was in a human. That was the first one reported in human, but then it carries on, through the poultry. And I mentioned the Lunar New Year because that is, their big celebration, and it's all a ton of poultry. Everybody. So if it's running wild in, the poultry, and they're, preparing this poultry and all of this kind of sets the stage for, okay, here we go with our spread to humans, right?
Okay. And
during that time, Yoshi, has this little blurb here. New studies suggest that the ability of the H7N9 virus to infect and replicate in human cells may be due to just a few amino acid changes in the genetic sequence of the virus. My gosh, he already knows that.
There you go. And so again, this is something I keep finding with these guys is they don't predict things that haven't already happened. So he's not saying potentially I could make these amino acid changes. What he's suggesting here is I've made some amino acid changes, and guess what happens? It's pretty wild, dude. It's like, next thing you know, old Jeb's a millionaire, right? So something tells me he was monkeying around with this thing before 2014, before the gain of function freeze, and that work took this thing to the level that where we were seeing that case fatality rate of 25% or what have you. All right, so let's go to this next slide. Now we go back to Lipkin. So this is when Lipkin shows up in 2013.
Right. And I wanted to mention this again. I know that we talked about it last week, but just to remind everybody. So you've got MERS started in 2012, ran into 2013. This is where Lipkin is noted saying, oh, look, two pandemics at the same time. We've got MERS and we've got H7N9. And here, though, just so we can see the timeline all together, this is where he signs the contract to work with China in regards to both MERS and, most importantly, the H7N9. And it's a 5-year contract, which starts in May and then ends in 2018. So
perfect timing. Now, to be clear, the MERS outbreak, Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, doesn't kill 1,000 people on the planet. All right, so it's the total death toll is something like 800 people or something like that. It's less than 1,000 people. So with all the press and all the coverage and all the, hullabaloo, it didn't kill 1,000 people. Neither did SARS-1. So the first SARS outbreak didn't kill 1,000 people.
And most importantly, I think, is there were a couple people that came to the United States, MERS cases. People were dying in Saudi Arabia. We didn't shut the country down. We didn't create a vaccine and said everybody needs to have it. So why now?
This was a different cat. This was a different kind of cat. All right, so Lipkin comes, he signs the deal. It ends in 2018. He's working together with the Chinese on H7N9. What could go wrong? Now, this is back then, Wuhan Institute of Virology back then was not BSL-4. This is when they had the IKEA curtains, and the place was, it was just a mess. This is before the new building. So they didn't have the high-end stuff back then. All the high-end stuff came relatively recently. Back in 2013, it really was a mess over there. I mean, it was kind of an embarrassment. So, all right, so this next slide, the Center for Infection and Immunity at Columbia University's Mailman School of Public Health and the National Institute for Viral Disease Control and Prevention within the Chinese Center will open a joint research laboratory for pathogen discovery. What could go wrong? Pathogen discovery, right, kids? I want my children to grow up to be little pathogen discoverers, right? Let's go see what we can find. To conduct surveillance, identify new infectious microbes, establish novel platforms for diagnostics, and develop drugs and vaccines to treat diseases in humans and animals that we find. So in other words, you mean if we go around with Q-tips and we stick them in the anus of a bat and we find a virus, then we can build a thing to protect ourselves from the virus that we just found from the anus of the bat that we probably shouldn't have been putting the Q-tip in the first place? What?
Exactly.
What's the matter with these people? I mean, it's like, really? It's like, why don't we just go find all the animals and find stuff in their feces that'll kill us and come up with vaccines for all these crazy things? What is wrong with them? Why do we have to keep doing this?
It's a moneymaker.
But this is just absolutely absurd. They're going into caves, literally getting fecal samples from bats. Have you ever been bitten by a bat? I lived in Thailand, and I had 5-foot bats flying over my house. I've never been bitten by a bat. And I can't say that they haven't crapped in my pool, but that's different. Now, I did read yesterday or today that 1 gram of chicken feces that's infected with H7N9 is enough to infect 1 million chickens. 1 gram of chicken feces has enough virus in it, if that chicken is infected, to infect 1 million chickens. Isn't that cool? Kind of makes you want a short Chick-fil-A stock, but I digress. All right, so let's continue here. All right, so we're developing drugs and vaccines to treat the diseases that we found in the anus of the bat. This is the first time an international team is going to operate a laboratory within the Chinese Center for Disease Control. Also very exciting, right? That's great. We really need great cooperation between the two countries, right?
Right. And this, again, too, on the next slide, we talked about this a little bit last week, Craig Venter getting the sequence at the request of the United States government. They download it, they start working with it, and from there they, start playing with it, and who knows what else. But from this work here is where they were able to produce the first vaccine through Novartis, if I'm saying that correct.
That's right. Yeah, Novartis. So Novartis partners with the government. They're working on clinical trials. And that takes us to this next slide, the experimental H7N9 avian flu vaccine. Is that right?
Yes. And that's just basically where this story is coming from, showing that they started that work, and that is dated November 14th of 2013.
So this is sort of wild. So what we're seeing here is that this timeline, this stuff was taking place during the Obama administration. This is before Trump was elected. This is before 2016, right? This is all during the Obama administration. This is all taking place, and it's taking place in China, right? So there's things happening in China. Now, this trial, the clinical trial of the 2013 product.
Right. So this is Novartis, but I want you to read this.
Okay.
And let the listeners hear it. And what does this sound like when you're reading it? At least to me. We'll see what you think.
All right. This is the 2013 continued, and I've got the 3 bullets, right?
Yes.
Okay. 2013, the trial used 2 doses given 21 days apart. Since H7N9 is a new flu strain, it's probable that no one in the general population carries antibodies to it. Now that's really important. We were talking about that the last time we spoke, that nobody had this as a kid. Nobody, when they were 3, 4 years old, 2 years old, 5 years old, nobody had H7N9.
So there's another small element of the story that I want to introduce you to here. It was discovered by this guy, Tom Francis Jr., who actually trained Jonas Salk and developed the first flu vaccine that was used during World War II. Pretty much the same technology that we use today, actually. And he noticed something really weird in the late 1940s. So in the late 1940s, there was a complete vaccine failure. The flu that was out there had changed so much that the previous vaccine just didn't do any good whatsoever. And so he was doing experiments and noticed that when he gave a vaccine based on the new flu variant that had replaced the old one to teenagers, instead of making antibodies to the new variant, as you would hope your immune system would do, it actually boosted up the old antibodies that it remembered from, that each person's immune system remembered from their childhood infection. And he named that process the original antigenic sin. So it's kind of like the other original sin that it kind of taints you for life, potentially. And it's part of the story. We'll come back to it. But what that's important for is the year-to-year dynamics of the things like H1N1 and H3N2 that are the seasonal strains now. It's less important for this process, which is the other big way that influenza comes up with evolutionary novelty. Instead of just making minor tweaks to the H or the N, every once in a while, a new flu virus is created that mixes and matches segments from 2 different viruses. So if you have a person infected with H1N1, and as happens from time to time, that person is simultaneously infected with a bird virus that normally doesn't infect humans, the virus that comes out that person can be an H1N7 if you have one segment or more from that bird virus jumping in. We call that reassortment, and that's, as you might imagine, a kind of game changer. Whatever immunity you had to N1 from your childhood infection or lifetime exposure, it's useless. N7 is so different antigenically that your antibodies to the previous version don't really help you. And that process, this jumping in of complete genome segments from nature, from non-human reservoirs, is what ushers in what we call pandemics, which are these worldwide big epidemics that are occasioned by completely new genetic diversity from the pool of various subtypes of virus that exist in these animal hosts jumping into humans and starting to spread. And so when that happens, let's say in 1957, after H1N1 circulated, an H2N2 virus jumped into humans in 1957. At that point, on an individual level and a population level, there was almost no protection from H2N2. And so you have a big year, a couple million people dying instead of 500,000. In 1918, you had the same process. You had some new stuff coming in, but 50 million people died. So this is the kind of layered history of the virus from now, when we have H1N1 and H3N2 circulating, back in time. If you were born before 57, your childhood infection, your first exposure was to H1N1. That set the stage for the rest of your life.
So no one has immunity to this thing. And that's a scary scenario. So that's number one. Novavax has a 3-year, $97 million contract with BARDA. That's exciting. And BARDA to develop influenza vaccines and manufacturing capabilities sufficient to produce enough vaccine for a pandemic. It's planning a second trial of the VLP vaccine. What's that? VLP?
I can't remember what it stands for, but it's basically just a different method of making the vaccine. It's like a recumbent vaccine instead of using the eggs. Yeah.
Okay. I gotcha. All right. Second trial, the VLP vaccine in early 2014 to nail down the minimum dose. Okay. So we got BARDA involvement already. That's not good. And the fact that they want to produce enough for a pandemic. Why were they anticipating a pandemic? That's weird. All right. 5 other candidate vaccines, H7N9 vaccines, are being developed. 5 others with results expected in 4 to 6 months. If this one works, the others are likely to as well because they're based on similar technology. If so, public authorities around the world would then likely have multiple vaccines to choose from should an avian flu pandemic emerge. So the thing here that I'm finding uncomfortable, discomforting, is that we were working on vaccines for this stuff 10 years ago.
Right.
So when it hit, was that a charade? Is that why we had vaccines in December of 2020? For this other thing?
Yeah.
Because we really had been working on them for 10 years already? Was that
2 doses, 21 days apart.
Does that sound familiar to you? Is that, cause I'm not familiar with the 6-shot regimen, with the booster kids. Homie didn't play that, so I don't know. 21 days apart, 6 feet apart. I don't really pay attention. So, was that the thing? It was 21 days apart.
Yes.
Ah.
Yes. It was.
Aha. So in other words, we're looking at a potential scenario where the work on this product began in 2013, and come 2020, they're telling you, well, we're going to hurry this thing up really, really fast, and we're going to have it ready by December.
You mentioned the vaccine. There are conversations about other therapeutics. Maybe talk for a minute about where are we in the vaccine development. You just announced the first trial for phase 1 to test the safety. What's the time frame for having something like that go through all of the different trials? How could we expedite that? What should people expect on that?
Okay, so if you look, to give our viewers and listeners a perspective, if this were, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and it was for any vaccine that we wanted to make, you would say a vaccine from the time you start to the time it's approved to be safe and effective is several years, 5, 6, 7 years. That's unacceptable for now. So what happened is that as soon as we got the sequence of the virus from the Chinese, we pulled it out of the public database and stuck the gene into a vaccine platform and worked on it literally within a day of when it came out. 65 days later, namely 2 days ago, we gave the first injection to a normal volunteer for a phase 1 trial to see if it's safe. That's the fastest that's ever been done. That's the good news. The challenging news is that even at that rocket speed, it's going to take a few months to show that the initial safety is okay. Then you go into a phase 2 trial, which instead of involving 45 people, which we have in the phase 1 trial, it involves hundreds, if not thousands of people. That will take another 6 to 8 months to even know if it works. So at the fastest we can go, it's going to take a year to a year and a half to know if we have a vaccine that we can use.
But I'm thinking that maybe that's not really what happened here. Maybe this thing had been in development since Obama was in office. And because we know the birds died, we know the chickens died. So they'd want to protect people. I mean, I know there's a lot of cynical people out there that think they want everybody to die, and to get the population down to 500 million or whatever the hell it is, or, I'm not kind of buying that stuff. I think Bill Gates is pretty comfortable at his house, with or without 4 extra billion people or not. I think he's doing fine. I don't think he really needs 4 billion dead people for things to be better for him next month. I'm not buying all that. I get it. There's a lot of people. I don't know what everybody's doing. I look at these big cities like Mexico City and Madrid, Spain. I don't know. What the hell's everybody doing? I don't get it. I don't know what everybody's doing to make a living. Hard for me to understand that. But, that's kind of a different topic. This notion that they potentially put out an inoculation product that had been in development for almost 10 years. I guess at the time in 2020 would be 7 years. But that's more normal in a life cycle of a product than going from we got the sequence to I'm sticking it in Joe Biden's arm in December. That's pretty radical if you ask me. I mean, again, I'm not an epidemiologist, but the fact that they stuck a needle in Joe Biden's arm in December of 2020, right? I didn't hallucinate that, right? That seems, 9 months? And we're sticking it in people already? Or was it really 7 years?
Or was it, as I have heard, just sailing? I mean, there's many things.
Or some combination of the
But this
above.
is, right. And this was very concerning to me because I'm looking at it and all I'm doing is changing H7N9 to COVID. Granted the time frame is off, but
And
But going, wait a minute, we've got 2 doses. We're, planning for a pandemic. It's 21 days apart. Will we have enough? We've got 5 people, 5 companies working on these. I don't know.
Boy, we know the mRNA contract with Pfizer is signed in 2018, before Crimson Contagion, which I found odd. The Moderna contract, we were talking about that January 13th. Only one guy's dead. We still don't know if it's contagious, but we're signing the contract. People were dying. But what were they dying from? Were they dying from this other thing that was killing the chickens? I don't know. But it seems like there was a whole lot more maturity to the H7N9 inoculations. And yet we haven't heard a peep about them, right? In fact, there was no test until a week ago Monday, right? There was the first testing for this came out in the last 4 years. There was no testing for it. So nobody's mentioned the inoculations. Nobody's really talking about the testing. And we've got 54 million dead chickens in America. Am I being alarmist, or what do you think?
Well, and I think, too, when you look at this whole timeline and you start to really put the pieces together and go, okay, how come from 2013, you'll see in the timeline from 2013 until 2018, this is all they, eat, sleep, drink, breathe, is H7N9. 2019, didn't hear anything really. And then all of a sudden the pandemic's announced, and then this goes like off the radar.
We had these vaccines that were in development 2013. We've got the trials. We've got 5 different candidates, 21 days apart. And this is for H7N9 in 2013. And then you take us to this gain of function experiments on H7N9. What can you tell us about that? Is that Kawaoka?
This is Yoshi and Ron, and you can see Webby is there as well. So, and I would have to look back and see if he was part of the World Health Organization at that time. You've also got Adolfo Garcia, who also participated in the gain of function with H5N1 with Yoshi. So I don't know who many of the other people are, but I do know their names.
Okay. And Ron Fouchier is at Erasmus in Netherlands, and he works with Marion Koopmans. So this is starting to make sense as to why she hasn't responded to anything I've been posting, is because she's probably working with Ron on this. So Ron Fouchier is the key guy at Erasmus in Netherlands with Marion Koopmans, and it looks like he was working with Kawaoka on the gain of function again in 2013. And then we move to 2014. What happens in 2014?
So 2014, this is actually, you and I have talked about this. I don't know if you've talked about it in your other podcasts, but this is actually where they had the PCR, the first PCR for testing that you could obtain through the CDC for H7N9. So this is just to show that, it was there, they had a PCR, and then it disappears.
Now, do we know when this was no longer available? Or am I going to have to use this URL and then go to the archive.org and figure out when it disappeared? That's usually how I do it.
I think you're going to have to do that.
Okay. All right. So I think, if I remember correctly, because I think I looked at it, but I didn't screenshot it, and I think it was January of 2020 that it was last visible. But I'm going to have to double check that. So, and then it came back just this past week, right? January 15th of 2024. Right. We now have a CDC test kit, but it's only available from the CDC or the WHO for H7N9. You can't get this from ePlex or Panther or BioFire. It's only available from the CDC or the WHO for some strange reason. I'm not sure why. Maybe because it's BSL-4. Yeah, maybe that's why. Yeah, it's BSL-4. All right, so let's go to this next slide. Testing recommendations for person with possible infection with avian influenza, H7N9 virus in the United States is made available by the CDC. So that's 2014. And then January 2014, we see a spike in reports of illness with 96 confirmed reports and 19 deaths. Where's this happening? That's in China, right?
This is in China, yes.
Okay. So this is January 2014. Sounds kind of serious. And then we have this third wave in 2014, 2015. Poultry in Guangdong province of China. Okay.
Correct.
All right. Then we go to 2014 with Yoshi. And he's continuing gain of function and creates a deadly new flu strain using H7N9 for pandemic research. And that's documented. Correct. But this is still before the gain of function funding and the hall pass that he receives for the gain of function pause. So that's Correct. In November. So what that means is he's doing all this other stuff on it anyway, with somebody else's money from some other pool or bucket prior to the letter that we see in November of 2014. What you're showing us here is July.
Right. And I will have to look, John, because when he was doing his H5N1 gain of function, Bill Gates was funding that. And I did not have time today to look to see if he was in fact funding this H7N9 during this time period.
All right, we'll have to take a closer look at that and see if there's a BARDA link there, because we saw BARDA. So again, the timing here is important, because what we're seeing is he's doing gain of function on the H7N9. He creates a new strain of it, and this is July. Mm-hmm. The funding thing, the letter that we get from the NIH, that's not till November.
Right.
This is...
And you go to the next slide.
Yeah.
This is the actual funding pause. So this is prior to the letter, but this is saying in October 2014,
right,
we're going to put a pause.
Right. And then 3 weeks later... Kawaoka and Barrick, but again, to me, anything Barrick's doing has nothing to do with this. I'm worried about the chickens, right? That's my focus right now, is dead chickens. So I'm looking at this. So we've got the pause now. This is the official gain of function pause that everybody talks about. But Kawaoka 3 weeks later gets a letter saying, for you, it's optional. You do whatever. You do whatever you want. So everything prior to this, to me, is now super suspect. I'm wondering now if this is like he's already got it. He's already there. This is to make it even worse. This is to take it to another level. We were just like he was with Fouché. They're doing this stuff in 2014 already. This is the end of the year now, and basically he's getting permission to keep doing what he's been doing. Keep cranking it, baby.
Yes.
Tell me, can you kill a horse in 20 minutes? That's your new challenge. See if it can kill a horse in 20 minutes. Then you've impressed us. That's what we're looking for. They're out of their minds.
Absolutely.
All right, so this is the letter. This is the one that's giving him the authorization to ignore the gain of function pause that went from 2014 to just a few weeks before Trump was inaugurated. They lifted it. But from 2014 through 2017, this pause was in place. Yoshihiro Kawaoka does not have to honor it. He gets to do gain of function anyway. And that takes us through the holiday season into 2015. What do we see in 2015?
So 2015 starts out with that symposium where Barrick and Yoshi go to advocate to continue allowing gain of function. So that's kind of the premise of that symposium, is
Gotcha.
to advocate for it.
Gotcha. And that's the one they go to in Singapore.
I believe so. There was two. There was one in 2015 and one in 2017.
Okay. And that takes us to the scientific reports, the serum profile of the hypercytokinemia factors identified. How do you like the way I just rolled out hypercytokinemia? Not bad. not bad for a cartographer. Identified in H7N9 infected patients can predict fatal outcomes. So the serum profile of hypercytokinemia factors. What are these hypercytokinemia factors? What is that?
So that, if you go to the next slide, it kind of talks about it a little bit more. Just saying that they discovered 34 of the 48 cytokines and chemokines. And we know that, during the pandemic, that was the big thing, is the cytokine storm was most evident in the patients who had the worst outcomes.
How does this compare?
Is pretty much.
Do you know how does this compare to the 1918 Spanish flu? Did that have 37 of the 48 or 42 of the? Do we have any idea? We'll have to ask Grok. We'll have to ask the artificial intelligence agent thingamajig. We'll say if we discovered 34 of the 48 cytokines in H7N9, how many do we discover in H1N1? That right? So we'll ask the AI that tomorrow. All right. So this is interesting. So one of the reasons this is interesting is that I think in the first year of the pandemic, we heard physicians talking about the cytokine storm. Mm-hmm. Then in the last year or 18 months, they started backing away from it and saying, no, it was not SARS-CoV-2 that causes the cytokine storm. Right? So that was kind of strange. And then there was almost like a disassociation, like, no, we never said that. We never said that the cytokine storm had anything to do with SARS-CoV-2. So that's bizarre.
Well, the literature says otherwise.
Yeah. Well, or was it something else that's causing the cytokine storm? In other words, SARS-CoV-2 is real, but the set of symptoms, the presentation from it, is not as severe as this stuff. This is BSL-4, crosses the blood-brain barrier, doesn't need any trypsin to do its thing. If it has trypsin, it goes in faster. We know that now, right? If there's trypsin present, it will infect faster. If there's no trypsin, in 48 hours, it's inconsequential. The virus is in. It does what it needs to do in 48 hours. So that I thought was impressive. But 34 of the 48 cytokines means this thing is kind of cytokine enabled. Would that be a fair way to say it? It's kind of ready to go. It's like, you want to talk about a cytokine storm. This thing's got
34 of them.
Right. This kind of is coming loaded for bear. It's not like it's got 3 or 4. It's got 34 of them. Thank God it doesn't have 33, or Jason would be already calling me. All right, let's go to the next slide here. The fourth wave, 2016. This took place in China, the largest since 2013. A cumulative total confirmed cases, 1,223. The WHO identifies H7N9 dangerous for humans. Most cases resulted in severe respiratory illness with a mortality of 30%, with an unusual prevalence of older males. All right. That is, by the way, the year that I believe I was infected living in Thailand. So when you talk about confirmed cases of 1,223 cases, I wasn't living in China. Now, I may have, I'm trying to remember if I went to Hong Kong. I don't think I went to Hong Kong in 2015 or 2016. I probably did go to Bangkok, and that's probably where I would have picked it up. But the reason I'm sharing that is not because my anecdotal story is important, but because I think that the number that they're representing here is underreported. I think that the spread was probably wider than was realized at the time, based on my own personal experience. And it knocked the hell out of me for 10 days. I mean, really, memorable. Really memorable. So I believe in 2016, this was the wave that not only was infecting people in China. My hypothesis is this began to spread through the region, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some sort of an outbreak. I'm going to have to take a look at that. I'll go back and look at the WHO data to see, is there any evidence of anything here, 2016, 2017, in the region?
Well, 2017 there definitely is.
All right, I want to look in the region beyond just China. I want to see, did Vietnam, did Thailand, did Laos, did they have some sort of an outbreak? And I'm going to take a look at that. Now, the WHO doesn't track H7N9, so it's going to be difficult to figure this out. But I think it was already maybe more widespread in 2016 than 1,200 confirmed cases. Somebody like me, I never go to the hospital. I'm not going to go get tested for something like that. So I'm under the radar, as are a whole bunch of other people that are not going to get tested. So that's just my 2 cents. All right, take us to this next slide, because this is huge. This knocked me out.
Right, and before we go there, we don't know in these patients at this point in time. So remember, in 2013, they had already started clinical trials for the H7N9 with Novartis. And so they may have already worked out all the quirks, and now China's getting it. Hear anything? I don't know. That's speculation. So maybe that's also contributing to a lower number, but I don't believe that the number is correct.
Well,
do some more digging, but okay. So to the next slide.
Yeah, this is huge because
so this
is a knockout. Yeah, this floored me when I saw this today.
So yeah, for this is, so that second one down, the mRNA 1851, is Moderna doing work with H7N9, which started their phase 1 trials in May of 2016. That's what's the key out of everything on this. That's the key thing I'm looking at.
Now, what's interesting, though, is that there's a bunch of mRNA vaccines in development in 2016.
Correct.
But the public was sort of introduced to mRNA in 2020 for the most part. And what I see on this list, all kinds of stuff here. Can you just kind of walk us through top to bottom, just real quick? I mean, I know we've got our, the homecoming queen is the 1851. But can you just quickly walk us through what's on here? What are these guys doing? They've got all kinds of products in the paddock, getting ready to release on the public. What's the first one?
So the first one, I would have to look at my other notes, but I believe, because remember, I posted it today, something about it, the H7N9 and the H108, I think it is. They were doing 2 influenza vaccines at the same time. That's the one where I posted, I said, you need to read this and look at it if you're so inclined. And it talks about these 2 vaccines right off the top, the first 2 on there.
All right, hang on. Let me interrupt, because this is something that Dayu mentioned. So Dayu, when we were talking about the first conversations about finding the H7N9 in the patients in Wuhan, said that there's a relationship between H7N9 and H10N2. And that H10N2 appears to be some sort of a predecessor gene. And again, I'm going to mangle it, and I'm going to make a mess of it because I don't know what I'm talking about. but I remember enough that Dayu pointed out that there's a relationship between H7N9 and H10N2. And that was on that green and yellow chart. And Dayu was talking about the H10N2 stuff. And I'm like, I don't care about that. I care about the H7N9. It's green, 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 green. It's all over the place here. I don't care about the predecessor gene. But now they're making a vaccine for that too, it appears. So that's the H10 product. So they've got an H10 vaccine and an H7 and 9
And the
product.
predecessor on the H7 is the the H9N2. And so that kind of comes into play too for all of them.
All right, I'm going to ask you, if you would, to check in with Dayu and find out what was the relevant connection between, again, I don't know if it's a he or a she, was talking about on that yellow and green report about the relationship between the H7N9 and the 8, because I don't understand this stuff. Again, this is out of my wheelhouse, but you'll understand it. Let's go to the next. What's the next line item there? Is that the one that's controversial or undisclosed, or one of them's proprietary, top secret, or something?
And that's the one I don't know what it is.
Yeah, undisclosed, top secret mRNA. We're gonna stick it in you. We're just not gonna tell you what it is, okay? But it's good for you. It'll save your life.
And I think I posted the link to it, even though it's absolutely blank. It's like 190 some odd pages, absolutely blank, confidential documents. And, I had to bite my tongue from saying that's exactly what the insert looks like to the vaccine. It's completely blank as well. So
they're off the reservation. I mean, this type of behavior. It's like, what do you mean you're working on a vaccine? You can't tell us what it is. You're using our money to develop it, using tax dollars to build these things. And then you guys are holding on to the patents so that you're all retiring in Switzerland. I think we got to break this system down. I mean, this is a mess. This is just not working right. What else do they have in there? They got Zika virus. I can't read it well from where I'm sitting. Can you tell me what else we have here on your table?
My thing, I can't pronounce them. There's 2 Zikas. There's a CMV. There's a chikungunya. I know I'm mutilating that, so sorry. And then there's this HMPV/PIV. Now, granted, one of the Zikas, the CMV, and the HMPV, those were not started until later. Then there is an AstraZeneca down below that started in 2017, and that says VEGF-A, but I don't know what that one is either. It's a vascular endothelial growth factor. So that's not even a vaccine. We're not talking vaccines there.
And wasn't there one in here that was that cranks up the interferon? It's like a super duper interferon kicker-upper kind of thing? Was one of these things?
I would have to go back and look at them.
Okay, yeah. One of them was like an immune booster by kicking up interferon production via mRNA. And so we'll send a little mRNA in there to tell your ribosomes to do a little this, do a little that, and make a little more interferon. I'm sure that...
I don't know if that's on this slide. I think that's on something else.
Okay. It might have been the same page that I found it on. All right,
yeah, I think it's on the same page that this came from, but it's not.
All right, we'll look at that. All right, so let's go to this.
You are correct on the H10. It's the H10N8.
There you go. That's it. Yeah. All right, so... But I don't know the connection. It's like, and where the hell is that? Who's had H10N8? And does that kill chickens too, or does that kill, alligators and what the hell is that H10N8? Is that like, for example, I know H3N8 is common in horses. So H3N8 is like the most common influenza strain in horses and maybe dogs too. I forget exactly, But I remember looking it up and trying to, what the hell's H3N8? And they say, oh yeah, this is the most common influenza in horses. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So that's what I'm wondering. So what the hell is H10N8? Is that the most common influenza in owls, barn owls, and what is the where does that thing fit in? I'm curious about that. All right, you want to take us to 2017 and Anthony Fauci?
Yes, and of course, everybody has probably heard this, but I thought it was appropriate to put it in here. And, so you've got Obama leaving, Trump coming in, and I believe he gave this talk at Georgetown, isn't that right?
Yeah, Georgetown University, and it's 1 week prior to the inauguration. 1 week prior.
Right. It's saying that there was no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but there will also be a surprise outbreak. Oh, Fauci.
Has he predicted other surprise outbreaks prior to that? And then he said that there was no question. He said everybody knows. There's no question. It's like, so everybody was kind of on board. Like, this is 2017, so this is still before Operation Crimson Contagion.
Correct.
Still haven't signed the contract for the mRNA product with Pfizer. So they're doing development work. With probably only $100 million for that. Right? So we don't do the deal until 2018. But Fauci's predicting something. And to me, it's like, well, dude, it's already 4 years in process. It's like it's underway. What do you... But nobody's talking to the Chinese people except for these high-up officials in the CDC back then. Back then, nobody was looking around. And so he could get away with this, but I think they've realized...
And we also didn't hear anything about it. Look at COVID. 1 death, and everybody knows they had how many deaths at this point, and really no mention.
Exactly. Exactly. So. Right. All right. So then we go to February 2017. Microsoft founder and philanthropist Bill Gates tells the Munich Security Conference genetic engineering could be a terrorist weapon and warns tens of millions could be killed by bioterrorism. Okay.
They're just great at predicting these things.
Yeah, these guys are very good. And then in 2017, we have effective control measures are urgently needed. H7N9, 2 lineages. Epidemic in China is split into 2 genetic lineages, the Yangtze River Delta and the Pearl River Delta. Does one of these lineages appear to be more pathogenic? Genesis and spread of a newly emerged highly pathogenic H7N9 avian virus in mainland China, 2017. The ancestor virus of the highly pathogenic avian influenza H7N9 viruses originated in the Yangtze River Delta region. However, the insertion of 4 amino acids.
Yes.
Oh, you're kidding me. He said it out loud.
Yes.
Holy mackerel, Amy.
Yes.
However, holy mackerel.
2016.
He said it out loud. Holy mackerel. Wow. However, the insertion of 4 amino acids into the HA protein cleavage site of a low pathogenic avian influenza H7N9 virus occurred in late May 2016.
It has this little blurb here. New studies suggest that the ability of the H7N9 virus to infect and replicate in human cells may be due to just a few amino acid changes in the genetic sequence of the virus. My gosh, he already knows that.
There you go. Oh, man. In the Pearl River Delta region. That's it. That's it. The insertion of 4 amino acids into the low pathogenic version, and voila. Now we can infect your brain. Man.
That happens in 2016, 2017. Now, again, like you said, they don't break down in the World Health Organization's data the H7N9.
They don't track it.
So,
right.
but they do have this massive influx of ILI,
Right.
and they're talking about, what are we going to do? We're going to have to vaccinate all these birds. The birds are dying, the birds are getting sick, and it's all around this time started to take off in 2017.
All right, so that takes us to this next slide, where you're showing that we've got new cases November, December 2017, and then we've got Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm.
And then they start vaccinating the poultry in China.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh, boy. And this is happening in 2017, in July of 2017. So this has been going on in China now for long enough that they're vaccinating the chickens. They've developed a vaccine, and they're vaccinating the chickens, and we learned last week that it takes 40 days to grow a roaster from hatch to ready for slaughter. It takes 40 days. And so if in that 40 days they're afraid they're going to get infected, they're vaccinating the chicken for a 40-day lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty crazy.
And in this paper that I pulled it from, it talks about a huge focus on the financial impact of this. Is it worth vaccinating all of these chickens?
Was that the Goldman Sachs? Was that the Goldman Sachs paper?
No, this is a different paper.
Okay, because they were very concerned. Like Goldman was like, "Oh, we're going to lose money on this thing." Some bastards. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, but that was part of where this discussion comes in. They see the rise of cases 2016. They decide they're going to vaccinate in 2017. But before they do it, they have this financial conversation. So now we've got to do something. Oh my gosh, it's out of control.
Unreal. All right, so now 2017 continued, even though China is most affected by the virus. The U.S. is also under threat. Federal officials identified the year's first outbreak of the avian flu in the U.S. among a chicken flock at Tyson Foods, a contracted farm in southern Tennessee. So we now have records of the outbreak in the United States in 2017 at a Tyson chicken farm location.
In the food plant. Yep, in the food supply.
In 2017. Mm-hmm. Now, 2017, Trump's just got into the office. He just walks in. Mr. President, we got a real serious situation over in China. It looks really bad. This is Dr. Fauci. Have you met Dr. Fauci? Dr. Fauci, you want to tell him what's going on? Yeah, it's really bad. Dead chickens. Looks like Tyson. Dead chickens. He just walked into the job. And they're handing him this mess. And he doesn't he doesn't like germs. He's a germaphobe. So the last thing he wants to get involved in is raw chicken virus, right? He's not interested. It's like salmonella and get it away from me. Go deal with it. Do whatever you want. Go deal with it. Get away from me. He doesn't want to hear about this crap. He wants to go build something somewhere. Chicken viruses. That's not his thing. All right, we've only got a few more minutes left together in this session. I hope you'll come back so that we can continue because we got a lot more to cover. But this 2017 outbreak, I didn't realize that it was hitting our chickens that early in the United States. So your next slide gets into the details. 2017 continued. March of 2017, highly pathogenic avian influenza detected in Tennessee. 2 days after the disease onset, the number of dead birds goes from 50 to 500 within a day.
Mm-hmm.
Birds are tested with PCR at CE Cord Animal Diagnostics in Nashville, Tennessee. That's next to the guitar shop. I know where that is. And then the samples were forwarded to the National Veterinary Lab at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It was confirmed H7N9 was also in Georgia, Alabama, and Kentucky. In 2017, huh? And Rand Paul didn't know about that, huh? Rand Paul didn't know that there was H7N9 in Kentucky? How did he not know that? Is that why he brought up avian influenza when he was talking to Tucker Carlson the other day?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Mr. Kentucky. Okay. Very interesting. The 27NT insertion coding for 9 amino acids at the HA cleavage site, the insertion sequence is underscored. It's identical to that found in the 2017 highly pathogenic avian influenza H7N9 from a poultry outbreak that occurred in Tennessee. Huh.
And this they find, doing the PCR in Tennessee and sending it off to, the agricultural people.
Right.
And they confirm that it has this highly pathogenic H7N9.
Ooh. And it sounds like this is a different type of cleavage. This is not a furin cleavage site. It's a slightly different type of cleavage.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I like it. I like it a lot. All right, and then we continue 2017 by request of HHS's Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority. Protein Sciences will start working. And I have a high preference for Protein Sciences over the Carbohydrate Sciences team. I don't like those guys. The Carbohydrate Sciences, they're no good. But Protein Sciences are going to start working on 2 H7N9 vaccine candidates based on new virus strains identified in the 5th epidemic of the disease. Maybe those new virus strains had the 4 changes, maybe to the... What do you think? Maybe?
Perhaps, yeah.
Maybe. The Meriden, Connecticut-based biotech will set off on the quest. Sounds like a video game. Using its recombinant vaccine platform called FluBlock. Huh. Instead of growing an influenza virus, the tech only uses a small piece of the virus needed to trigger an immune response, resulting in faster development process. So that's the stupid explanation of mRNA. That's mRNA for morons. This explanation here.
I'm not completely certain.
Sounds
I
like
need
it.
to look into them a little bit, but yes.
It sounds like dumbed down. We're not going to use eggs, and we're just going to use a small piece of the virus to trigger an immune response. So they're describing how the mRNA is read by the antigen, read by the ribosome, and then the ribosome then kicks out what it's supposed to do. But they're dumbing it down very nicely. He's good at the dumbing down stuff. All right, we've got less than a minute together, so I don't want to do this next slide.
I think this is a good place to end then.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So we've got a timeline here that's showing us just a tremendous amount of effort, focus, and work going into this particular pathogen. And yet it seems like nobody's really aware of it. What's all that about?
We'll soon see.
I guess so. Amy, this has been incredible. I can't thank you enough for joining me one more time here. I'm John Cullen. Thanks, everybody, for joining, Hypothetically Speaking.
Thank you.